What's up, everybody? Welcome in GC Live Thursday episode. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark. As always, we're presented by our good buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, ClintHammond.com, 803-771-6933 as South Carolina rolls along ever closer to South Carolina versus Missouri. We tell you about Clint every single show. Obviously, if you're in the market for a new home, maybe you're a little bit just frustrated with the whole situation right now with mortgages and interest rates and all that stuff. You may actually be in a better situation than you think. So just give Clint a call. He can help walk you through this process. 71597 is the NMLS number. You can just shoot him an email to chammond@mortgagenetwork.com. 50-50 chance he's going to talk to you about South Carolina football as well once he finds out you're a Gamecock fan, and that is what we are here to do today. Chris, I got to say, our series of the insert opponent here view is actually one of my favorite episodes every single week because we never leave having not learned something new. And we'll be joined here momentarily, about 10 or 15 minutes, by Gabe DeArmond. I know Gabe's a good friend of yours, PowerMizzou.com, and probably one of the better not only guys as far as having a feel for the program, but also as far as just not holding back and having opinions and being entertaining. Really looking forward, as we do every year, to hear from Gabe here in a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say something that would almost make Gabe sound old, but he has been around a while. He has seen a lot at the Missouri football program, so knows a ton. I mean, he has been there throughout Missouri's, transition into the SEC, covered Gary Pinkel, covered Barry Odom, way before that even. And then obviously in this era of Eli Drinkwitz. So he's well connected, knows a lot about this team. And I certainly, Wes, have a lot of questions to ask him, big picture about Missouri, and then also just kind of diving into the personnel and some of the matchups that we're going to be talking about leading up to this game.
Yeah, as you see behind Chris, he is live right now from our Still Hands studio, hanging out over there. Great folks over at Still Hands. Shout out to those who joined us on this past Friday. And be on the lookout. The Friday before the Tennessee game will be dropping by Still Hands as well. Of course, great spot to grab a beer, grab some food. Great partners with us over there at Still Hands. Chris, so you and I have not talked here on the show really since any of the press conferences. So I figure while we're waiting on Gabe to get in, again, probably 10, 15 minutes there, let's talk a little bit about what we learned, what we didn't learn. Beamer on Tuesday, then, of course, all three coordinators on Wednesday. You don't always get a ton from those things, but I do think there was some information to glean this time around. I'll let you go first. You can pick any coach. Give me one takeaway from what we learned from the press conferences on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Well, I'll go to one not so serious one and then one serious one. Everybody was talking about Marcus Satterfield saying good old Satterfield when they talking about how they went 3-and-out, which was funny. I mean, to be serious about the non-serious matter, we've talked before about how Marcus Satterfield, is not afraid to be self-deprecating or say when he screwed up or take ownership of things. And I think there's been a lot of talk about the offense this year, and there's a lot of different opinions out there on Marcus Satterfield, but certainly that's one thing that you can all, I think fans and media types like us should all respect, is that he does try to go up there and answer questions, doesn't give you a bunch of coach speak. So that was kind of a funny moment. But the serious thing that I came away with was, and, I maybe hadn't dug into this as much statistically, but Satterfield mentioned how, this team is they find themselves behind the sticks a little bit too much. It's going to be critical against Missouri. I think this is why he was illustrating the point for them not to get in those third and longs, because that's when Missouri wants to be creative, send a lot of exotic blitzes at you. They have a good front four. They have really a good front seven who can get after you, some guys that can cover. And so he had mentioned how they've gotten in too many of those situations, but they've actually been pretty good in them. I know Colin Taylor had some numbers yesterday on Spencer Rattler's third down numbers in the last two games. He's been quite good there, actually. But Marcus Satterfield isn't really comfortable with how much they've gotten behind the chains. He even mention that they've been better in those third and longer type situations than they have in short yardage at times, which is something that this team is obviously going to need to reverse. That's not really a sandbox you want to play in, and relying on being able to convert third and longs. It's obviously a great thing if you can do it, but you'd much rather, be in, okay, 2nd and 6, now 3rd and 2 and 1 and go convert that.
Yeah, it's been weird, man, how much more efficient they have kind of been at times here lately on third down, yet have still been in some of those third and longs. It's not a recipe for success. Like, you certainly applaud it when you do it, when you are successful with it, but you also look at it, I think, as something that's not really sustainable. So, obviously, fans will, and Satterfield pointed to this, like, the 3rd and 2s and then the 4th and 1 late. I mean, you got to find a way, clearly, to be a little bit better at executing those. Satterfield also was asked, do you, obviously every coach scripts plays, but do you go off of the script no matter where you are on down and distance? And a question that was obviously pointed towards when South Carolina took over inside the 10 and had to kick a field goal on the drive after the Darius Rush interception. And, he pretty much confirmed what you and I had said in our conversation, that, these were probably the goal line plays that they had been working on all week long going into this game, thinking they might have something against A&M there. I thought, frankly, the more I went back and looked at it, man, the obvious is give the ball to Marshawn Lloyd. Like, I think we kind of all agree on that. But I think A&M, which was a very, very successful red zone defense coming in, you brought up the point they've only given up 3 rushing touchdowns in the season heading into that game. They defended all 3 plays, like, very well, I thought. So, yeah, I agree with the give Lloyd the ball. At the same time, football is not played in a vacuum. It's not played against air. Sometimes you give credit to the opponent as well. So, I think I can kind of see all sides to that one. And the offense, I thought, just struggled to find their rhythm off the bat, just because it was such a weird game the way it started out. And let's be honest, if something we were talking about actually with Beckham, who's on here as well. How many near misses has this offense had this year that, if they would have hit, would completely maybe change what we're talking about after a game? I mean, that ball down the middle of the field, that the one where Jalen Brooks got banged up on, where he kind of adjusted and almost made the catch. I was watching the replay on YouTube, where you can just click back by 5 seconds. I think I watched that throw 10 times, because I'm just like, the ability. It's one thing to, like, watch it happen. It's another thing to, like, put yourself in those shoes and just think about throwing the football yourself, and the amount of sort of effort that the average human being has to put into throwing a football 30 yards, 40, and he flipped it on the run into the middle to back of the end zone. That was just one of those throws where I was like, good Lord, this kid and Spencer Rattler can do anything. And if that play hits, man, maybe it is a different conversation.
Yeah, that was one. There have been. I'm kind of going back in my head now that you made that point. I mean, a lot of near misses. You think about the Arkansas game, man. You can go through and say, yes, South Carolina, they obviously had not hit the kind of the path that they're on, the identity that they've created right now. They weren't there yet against Arkansas, and so we saw a bunch of passing yards in that game. But part of that was because South Carolina was playing from behind. You're playing more frantically, but they missed a bunch of big plays in that game. There have been a lot of them this season. Heck, I mean, the early deep throw to Xavier Legette against SC State, even that ends up being an interception because it goes off his hands when he stumbles. That's one that throw to Brooks that you referenced was amazing. So there have been several of those. And, when I look at the A&M game, I not only look at plays like that, some near misses or near hits, if you want to call them that, in the passing game, but also just, again, the turnovers, man. I mean, that to me, we can talk about run game, hitting explosives, Those things are extremely important. But to kind of get back to basics and boil it down, and I'm going to keep saying it every week until it changes. This offense can't afford to have as many turnovers as they have been having, and they've been having very inopportune turnovers. You think about the Kentucky game. You got a chance to go down there and really make a statement. You fumble the football. Driving down to score, your worst case scenario should be a field goal. Instead, you get a turnover. You think about the A&M game. You have two different drives in that game that were one play each. It's not like you drove down the field and fumbled or threw a pick. You're literally way backed up on your side of the field. You fumble the ball twice. Now A&M gets it short field. They get 10 points out of it. And for the most part, you limited that team the rest of the game. So that to me is honestly one of the bigger storylines offensively. I think Spencer Rattler in his decision making has played more, he looks more confident, but he's also been more cautious. And so if they can kind of meet in the middle of get Spencer to air it out, hit some of those throws that we've been referencing, and for the entire team take care of the football, I think that's kind of your formula to get things going and clicking in the passing game.
Yeah, and I'm of the belief there's like no such thing as a good turnover, but because you look at it on one end, if you make the turnover South Carolina did, you're talking about being in in A&M or in your own territory, giving them the football there, short field. You talk about a drive where if you've moved the ball, then you turned over, you're like, well, you're actually in a position where you should have had points, and you turn the ball over. The only time, in my opinion, not all turnovers are created equal. Like if a guy is trying to make a play on 3rd and long and you lob one up and it's just a one-on-one situation and it gets picked off, and it's a punt basically, I'm okay with that. But just about any other time, I'm like, if you're driving, then you're taking points off the board for yourself. If you're backed up, you're putting them in position for points. I mean, maybe but even at midfield, you kind of feel like, all right, we're making some progress on this drive, or we've started a drive with great field position. For the most part, 90% of turnovers are just bad. And when it's on the first play of a drive, when you actually have some momentum, that's when, that was another, if you want to really nitpick the play calling, the straight drop back pass that led to the fumble. I guess there might have been a little RPO type aspect to that. I don't know, but it wasn't, we're throwing on the move. It wasn't, getting the mobility involved. That was another call where I was like, man, you kind of have all the momentum. The only thing in the world that can happen here that is really, really bad is to turn the ball over and give them new life. So I'm never one for like super conservative play. I think that gets you beat, but at the same time, there's probably some other call. That's probably a call you might want back. Looking back at this game. So I wrote in my 3 takeaways from the press conferences. How about, let's go way, way, way back. How about the decision for Pete Lembo to go with Xavier Legette at kickoff return, knowing you had a really solid to good kickoff returner with experience already in Juju McDowell. And, I think when that came out on the depth chart, and, I had heard a few weeks before, Legette might win this job. I don't even think I published that or put it out there because I was just like, really? That, like, it kind of caught me off guard. He's a little bit taller guy, completely different mold than Juju, but they trusted their instinct on that. And looking back, it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But it was fully on display why they went with that move on Saturday, obviously.
Yeah, that almost reminds me of like a pitcher. Like you're thinking about like managerial decisions, like pinch hitting a guy or like bringing in a reliever or whatever. And if it hits, you're like, that was a great move. If they gone through this entire season and maybe didn't spring a kick return, there's probably a bunch of people saying, why didn't you go with Juju? But, obviously Pete Lembo is a guy that has proven it's not just a concept or a thought or maybe an opinion. He knows what he's doing from a special team standpoint, scheme with personnel. And so that was good to see, and good for Xavier, man. I mean, obviously, he has not had, I think, the type of season that I expected. I mean, remember all the talk coming into the preseason throughout, the spring preseason camp was how much of a step he had taken in practice, which is obviously the step you have to take to be able to do it on the field. And he had a really good spring, a good summer, a good preseason, but the production on the field hasn't been as much there. Juice Wells has been really the top guy. Josh Vann hasn't had the type of season either, that we anticipated, but he's kept working. He had the tough outing against SC State, man, where you have two balls go off your hands that are catchable and end up being interceptions. But everybody stuck by him, and he kept working, and he's continued to play and made the most there of his opportunity. That was, as Pete Limbo and Shane Beamer laid out, there were some good blocks on that kick return, and there were some not so good blocks on that kick return. And Xavier, to his credit, did a really good job on it, kept his feet, kept his wits about him, and was able to throw up the peace sign on the way to the end zone. So that was really cool to see.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. I would
Yes.
I would encourage all of you to go watch Pete Limbo's press conference from Wednesday. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll learn something. It has a little bit of everything. The excitement level that Limbo has for special teams in general is it's just awesome. And him telling the story about the kickoff return going past your opponent's sideline is akin to basically being on the side of the road and watching your ex-girlfriend drive by with her new man. Limbo is a national treasure. If I'm South Carolina, I don't know if this Charlotte thing, it certainly, and guys, I know how coaches are. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, I interviewed for that job Tuesday at 3:28 over Zoom. But for one, I don't think Charlotte is anywhere close to being that far down the road on their coaching search. For two, right off the bat, it felt like the Clayton White and the Pete Limbo mentions were more just like, hey, these are two guys who are coaching geographically similar area who, Limbo will probably have an opportunity one day to be a head coach again if he wants it. Clayton White, lots of people believe he's got a head coaching future ahead of him. It felt more like, all right, here's some guys that might make sense than this is their top 5 or top 10 or anything like that. Two sides of that to me. Limbo still sounds like a head coach when he talks. He even gives an opening statement. Gives a very full picture. Very head coach-like. Was very underrated as a head coach, Chris. Also, nothing against Charlotte. Also get the feeling it would take the right job, and I'm completely speculating, but it would take the right job, for either one of those guys to disappear and go on out there for their next head coaching job. And, Limbo appears to be having a blast, if you ask me, at South Carolina.
Yeah. This is part, I think, of the culture that Shane Beamer is establishing in Columbia. We've seen how much fun and kind of joy he's injected or re-injected into the program. Now, of course, you do have to have wins, Wes. Like if this team won 2 games this year, the mood in the locker room and the amount of fun they're having is not as much. It's not fun to lose, right? So it certainly helps to win, but you look at how he held things together last season, lots of ups and downs, but they managed it, finished the year well. A lot of positive vibes during that season and in the off season, and we've seen it now. So it's not just the players, it's the coaches. Remember how often Gamecock fans would talk about, well, when are some of those coaches at Clemson going to leave? And it finally happened. But part of establishing a good culture is having a good, environment in your place, a place that's good to work, somebody that's not going to overwork you and is going to prioritize family. That's important for certain types of coaches, for certain personalities. And so guys like Clayton White and Pete Limbo and some of the other coaches they have on staff, that kind of appeals to them more. And so this isn't a place right now under Shane Beamer where coaches are maybe just using this job as just a stepping stone, right? Now this is a place where you like to come and work. And I think that flows down from Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer, it's been kind of funny, Wes, seeing people saying, well, he just wants to get back to Virginia Tech. We even had one person, so it's not worth spending much time on, but one person saying the Auburn job. Oh, well, they should go after Shane Beamer, and a bunch of Auburn fans saying, well, he would definitely leave. No, he 100% wouldn't. We don't need to ask him. We don't need to source that. Like, this is the destination job for Shane Beamer. And so I think, that it kind of flows down to the rest of his staff. So not a bunch of guys just looking to get out and take the first head coaching job or the first coordinator job they can find. It's a place that he's made enjoyable to work at.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to what those guys are doing right now, man. You'd be pretty dumb if you're an AD not to at least look into those guys. I feel like if you're looking to make your next hire. And dude, Charlotte, to me, not that this show's about Charlotte, but to get rid of Will Healy that quickly, when you do not have the resources in place or the support in place yet at that program to expect what they expect out of him, insane move, if you ask me. But that's them. I don't know all the inner workings. I know enough about the inner workings to know that's, I thought, a very short-sighted move, and there's some good coaches on that staff, man, that I really feel for. But so Chris, are we scrapping the Gabe segment? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, everyone. Something came up for Gabe. He is going to be unable to join us. So sorry about that. So Wes, you and it is up to us now
to give the Missouri view.
We're going to have to give the Missouri view. Put on your best Gabe DeArmond hat.
Those are big shoes.
They are big shoes. I do not think we'll be able to fill them, just to let people know. But we can try. We've watched some Missouri. We know a few things about Missouri, so we'll just do the best that we can.
Yeah, apologize for that, y'all. We were looking forward to having Gabe. We thought we were having Gabe, and then had something last minute pop up, and I'm sure he is sorry as well. We've had Gabe on many times before, and he's been fantastic. But so let's see, where was I going to go with that? Yeah, so the kickoff return as well. I feel like we're getting way into the weeds with it, but it is an example of how detail oriented this guy is. I feel like a lot of special teams, and we've talked about how it's kind of sometimes just coach speak to say, oh, it's a third of the game, and we put as much emphasis on that as anybody else. I don't want to necessarily have that conversation before or again. I mean, but the attention to detail, like I feel like for some special teams coaches, not all, maybe not even most, but it's kind of like, all right, here's the X's and O's. Here's what you're supposed to do on this. Like you can probably Google special teams formations and, this is what you're supposed to do. I feel like the attention to detail is just at a completely different level at South Carolina than most places. Him talking about, hey, it's not even that you block the right person. It's the timing on the kickoff return of when everything syncs up to where you're blocking this guy, then this guy, then this guy as the returner hits the seam that you're looking for to break it. It is Pete Lembo showing the PAT/field goal team on the lead into the game that, hey, A&M blocked this kick from Alabama. You need to be in position, if it happens here, to recover it and not allow a return back the other way, which would have cost South Carolina 2 points if Tonka doesn't make the tackle and would have cut it back to 7 with the football for A&M. Remember when we had Parker White on and he was talking about the 7 yards versus 8 yards, and they were like, oh, do you snap it on a field goal for 7 or 8? And they were having the discussion, and it was like, well, Lembo wants 8, so the answer is 8. But
right.
there is, for those of you who didn't see it, there is a specific number of rotations that the football takes from the short snapper to the holder's hands. Like, this is not just a random thing. They snap it with a specific amount of rotations for every single snap, and that's where it's supposed to be easiest for the holder to catch it and put it down. So Lord knows what other details are expressed in these meetings on special teams, but we've just spent 15 minutes talking about it, and that's not enough compared to how beneficial special teams play has been for South Carolina. And it's even made it kind of cool to talk about, I feel like.
We have not spent probably, Wes, in our entire career as much time combined, cumulative, as we've spent talking about special teams, probably just this season. I don't think that's much of a – and, dude, Parker White, I mean, those two guys, Limbo and Parker White last year, that was like a match made in heaven. I mean, Parker White gave us about a 30-minute dissertation on anything. I mean, each thing he had a specific detail breakdown for, and Pete Limbo too. But it's a great point you made. Like, there's a why with Pete Limbo on everything. Everything just, there's a reason for everything. I think he's able to communicate that to the players. And it's really just what they do. There's a lot of crossover, and everything's just ingrained with what they do special teams wise into defense or into offense and vice versa, so that everything just kind of matches up and makes sense. It doesn't even feel like a third game, like a distant number 3. Like, it feels very much just as important as offense and defense, and really kind of syncs up with both of those if you really think about it.
Yeah, it does, man. So trying to think, anything else from press conferences that caught your attention? I thought this is actually a Colin Taylor question to Clayton White about sacks versus pressures. And it's even interesting. I was looking through, somebody actually referenced them. I was looking through the SEC StatCat Twitter today, and he was putting out his like thread of different rankings for, I mean, all types of different stats. And it's interesting. South Carolina's still not near the top of the league at all in like tackles for loss, for example. But the top 2 teams in the conference in terms of pressuring their opponent, according to Clark Brooks, who is SEC StatCat, Georgia and South Carolina. So any defensive category that you're right beside Georgia on, you're doing something right. And, Clayton White was asked, hey, do you have to have sacks to be happy with your production? And Clayton, sort of kidding, but not kidding at all, was like, I mean, we've had a lot of quarterbacks limping off while playing our defense.
It's true. I mean, you look at last week, man. I know you had some more like zoomed in numbers on Jordan Birch, I think, but I can't remember if we mentioned this statistic on the show, but 33 pressures against A&M, and I think that was on 47 or 48 dropbacks. So, I think it was 11 hits of the quarterback, and you pointed this out this week. Hit was not a glancing blow. They hit some guys on Saturday against A&M, 22 hurries of the quarterback, and a lot of those from the front 4. Like, South Carolina does blitz a lot. Yes, we saw some blitzes against A&M. I remember, DQ Smith got a hit in on the quarterback. I know Cam Smith got a hit on the quarterback. But a lot of that was just the front 4 rushing the passer and forcing them into some quicker throws and some mistakes. And there's another statistic, Wes, on top of that we'll talk about when we get a little bit more into actual Missouri's personnel. Reason why I think it could be another potentially big day for South Carolina's defensive line too.
Yeah, man, I want to try to save. We got to save a little bit for tomorrow as far as the actual South Carolina versus Missouri aspect of this. But let's try to get into Missouri a little bit now as far as what they try to do on both sides of the ball, what their personnel is. And let's start with their defense, man, because their defense has been really good. And they have kind of found a good mix where, in my opinion, scheme matches personnel defensively, in that they have some really talented guys up front who can get after, not just get after quarterback, but can just be disruptive, whether that's quarterback or run. And they kind of paired it with a defensive philosophy where they're gonna get after you, they're gonna slant, they're gonna stunt, they're gonna really chase you. And I think that has worked well for them. I had forgotten until I looked today how just unsuccessful they were defensively last season. They have made, I know the season's not over, but they have made a huge jump statistically from 1 year to the next with their first year defensive coordinator, Baker. What's Baker's first name?
Blake Baker.
Blake. I was about to say Brian Baker. Blake Baker, former University of Miami guy. Actually took a little bit of a demotion to leave there, then came to Missouri, then got promoted to Missouri DC this past offseason. Huge step up for them defensively.
Yeah, they've been really good. I mean, they look like a very athletic bunch. You know, they made some additions in the portal that helped them. Some of their guys up front, a year older, Trajan Jeffcoat from down the road in Irmo. They've got some guys that can really rush the passer up front. That was a huge theme last year, even though they were not very good statistically. I know if you think back to that game last year, Wes, you think about a lot of Missouri pressures and a lot of Missouri sacks. They do that still, but now they've kind of done it to everybody a little bit instead of just South Carolina last year. So, like, you look at this team and the way they play defense, they are aggressive. They're aggressive up front. They're athletic up front. They have some guys that can cover man-to-man on the back end. And so the results have been pretty good this year. They gave up 40 to Kansas State, which does have a good offense. But other than that, you know, they've limited teams. They've given themselves a chance to win, and that's with an offense that has not been dynamic at all. So I think it almost makes it even more impressive, right? Like, you hold Georgia to 26. Florida is a 24-point game, and I think one of those was a pick six. Vanderbilt only had, I guess, 7 offensive points in that game. That's not going to win you any awards, but still, Vandy's improved on offense, and they were able to hold them down. They've just been pretty consistently good the last several games, you know, defensively. So for a South Carolina team that has been kind of up and down, a little more of a mixed bag, struggled with turnovers at times offensively, that is certainly a challenge coming into this game, because if you can't score, if you can't move the ball, if you don't play well, a lot of other resulting bad things can happen in a football game.
Yeah, and you mentioned Trajan Jeffcoat. There are, for it to be a Missouri team, there are a few little connections. You know, Tyron Hopper, I think, is playing there for them now. A guy South Carolina recruited who played some ball at Gaffney. And then, you know, didn't South Carolina go after the Rakestraw kid late?
Yeah, they had offered. He was one of those kids that picked up like a bunch of offers,
All
like
late?
randomly late. I think he was from Texas, and that was a pretty big get for them. South Carolina had offered Luther Burden, like everybody else in the country, never really in the game, but yeah, Rakestraw, Burden, and I'm sure there's a few other kind of random guys probably sprinkled in there.
Yeah, not a ton of ties other than those guys, but it's just been a weird matchup between these two teams. Some interesting games along the way. South Carolina having lost 3 straight. Got to get that turned around if the program's going to be where they want it to be, I think. And so offensive side, man, what I don't know how many of their games you've gotten to see. I know people can read some of your thoughts on the Insiders Report today. What are your thoughts on this offense and why it just can't get going? Just seems like a lot of teams these days, they just struggle to protect their passer.
That was the biggest thing that stood out, man. They've just the mistakes, you know, like you look at the Vanderbilt game, they were up 17-0, which you don't feel amazing about. Up 17-0 over Vandy at home. That was solid, not great. But then the second half happened, and it ends up being a 17-14 game. I mean, they don't put any more points on the board. They turned the football over 4 times, and one of them was a Vandy scoop and score. You know, then you look at their game against Georgia. It's not like they played amazing, but they were turnover free. Georgia had 2 turnovers to their 9. And then Missouri, you know, had some big notable gaffes in that game. I mean, one of them was obviously they were, right on the goal line. They false start, and then they end up not scoring a touchdown. And so that margin kind of ends up being the difference in the game, you know. So they've just been pretty mistake prone. They've been kind of hit or miss in the run game. This is the type of run game that they can crease you for 20, 25 yards. They can get Luther Burden involved in the run game, even as a receiver, but they have a lot of negative plays, and then they have a lot of negative plays from the quarterback position. So, Missouri really struggled last week at times, from my eyes, to protect against Vanderbilt even. They're going to face a much tougher defensive line, in my opinion, with South Carolina, so we could see that. And this is the stat I was going to give, Wes. We'll talk about it more tomorrow, I'm sure, but I wanted to go ahead and give it. Brady Cook, no passing touchdowns on the road, not only this season, but ever. Has not thrown a passing touchdown on the road during his career. Now, 2020, he attempted 7 passes. He didn't play a lot. I think he played or started a couple games last year. It's mostly been spot duty, but still, he has not been super successful in his career. He's played at Georgia. He didn't attempt to pass at Arkansas in 2021. Look at the Kansas State game this year. No touchdowns, 2 picks. At Auburn, no touchdowns, 1 pick. At Florida, no touchdowns, 2 picks. I think one of those was a pick 6. So that kind of illustrates they've had trouble protecting him at times, and he's made some negative plays at times as well from the quarterback position.
Yeah, so Chris, one thing that South Carolina fans can take great solace in, I'm about to try to pull this up for you, that is that this man is in the NFL at this point.
You're absolutely right about that. What was the other dude? For some reason, I'm completely blanking. Larry Roundtree.
Yes, they have had clones.
He played at Missouri for 15 years, and Beatty did too. Yeah, Tyler Beatty, that guy. Whew.
He that had to be such a frustrating game to watch last year from a South Carolina fan perspective. It felt like Beatty won that game. I don't remember his stats from that game last year, or what it looked like. But dude, that like sort of stretch play that they run, just getting him out on the edge, it feels like almost every play was just him doing that. And then on offense, here's what I remember about that game. South Carolina turning the ball over on offense. Tyler Beatty on the stretch play, averaging like 18 yards a carry. And that Missouri scouted the Jason Brown backward spin move.
Yes.
Took that away. And then I remember Jason Brown making a couple of big-time throws in the game. And then South Carolina catching Missouri on the best play that's ever happened that was successful every single time they ran it. And that was that little pick play where South Carolina would run Z White straight into the O-line, basically, and they'd shoot him out the other end. It was like a screen, but not a screen. Against man coverage, it worked like every time they ever ran it, I think. And it just being a very disappointing night for South Carolina coming off of a massive win. But, their running game this year, they have this guy, Cody Schrader, who's like a transfer in from Truman State, is like their second leading back. Their top back has put up solid numbers. Nathaniel Pete rushed for 387 yards. Schrader's rushed for 363. It's not that they're terrible by any means, but the second I saw Tyler Beatty was in the NFL and I double checked for sure that he was not there, I was like, that helps the Gamecocks' chances quite a bit.
Just making sure he wasn't on both rosters somehow.
Yeah, I was like, this. You never know with this guy.
I couldn't remember either. It's funny, man, how so some of before I covered the team for some reason, like the Darren McFadden games, like I can even remember the stats, the Tim Tebow games against South Carolina. Some of the bad performances that South Carolina has given up they get blocked out for some reason. So I couldn't remember. I remember the stretch play, like you said, but I couldn't remember the stats. Here they are. Look them up for everybody's listening pleasure.
Hold on, can I guess?
Please.
Beatty. I feel like Beatty rushed for 160 yards.
Okay. How many carries you think?
Dude, I'm completely guessing. Like, this is not one of those things where I know and I have a great memory on this.
Oh, yeah,
It has been deleted.
You remember correctly that he had lots of yards in the game.
It seemed like he had a bunch of carries too. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'll say like 30 carries.
34 carries. Okay. 209 yards. So that's a 6.1 a carry. So it's not 18 a carry. Just one touchdown. But yeah, he was
there's no way.
and I think on the last drive, South Carolina had a chance, and Tyler Beatty basically salted the game away.
They couldn't get a stop. That's right.
Yeah, on another ridiculous, run. You just couldn't stop him. So yeah, huge that he's, in their running game this year, they can hit you. Watching some of their games this year, they can bust some runs on you because they run those stretch plays, those outside zone plays where it is conducive when you're playing an athletic defensive line. If it kind of develops slowly, it is conducive to giving up some negative plays. Every now and then they'll pop a -6 or a -4 on a running play. But if it hits, they can, they get some cutback lanes. If they have enough time for it to develop, you can give up 20, 25 yards. And that for South Carolina is what you want to avoid. You want to be in the situation like you've been against Kentucky and A&M the past few weeks where you're getting those teams into third down. Then you can send your guys after them and force the quarterback into mistakes. So really the formula, man, kind of similar.
Yeah, have you seen the FPI like matchup predictor on this game?
I've not. I always rely on you for the FPI.
What's your guess on South Carolina has this percentage to win the game according to ESPN FPI?
It can't make it. Man, it'd be surprising if it was a big. I'm gonna go 67%.
Woo, Chris, 68.2.
God, dude, I almost said 68. I should have said it.
68.2 to 31.8. Yeah, that's about so. To me, that's like almost the same as saying they'd win 7. If they played 10 times, they'd win 7 of them.
Yep.
So that's
what that means. South Carolina's still got to play well.
They absolutely have to play well.
Yeah, you can't go in and play a C game and win. It won't happen.
It feels kind of like it could be a turnover fest.
Yeah, it does.
That would be ugly. Beckham says, I don't know if I trust it. My life experiences won't let me.
You probably shouldn't at this point. I mean, look, South Carolina's gotten it done the past couple weeks, man. They started hot in both those games, but then adversity hit. Now, to their credit, they were able to weather that storm. They went out, they took the game, they won it, they held off the competition. But this isn't a South Carolina team that's out there just steamrolling people. Kentucky game was relatively close. Not as close as the final score indicated, but, Kentucky got a late score. The A&M game was certainly very close for most of the game. That wasn't the first, 11 seconds or however long it was. It's been a close. It's neither of these teams is really built to blow out, any other squad. Missouri's gotten themselves in some very close games. The Florida game was a 7-point game. Vandy was a 3-point game. Georgia was a 4-point game. Auburn was 3 points in overtime, extra time. So this is a team that plays a lot of close games. They haven't found a way to win very often, except for the Vandy game, but they do find themselves in some close games. And turnovers certainly has played, a part in that, and it has for South Carolina as well.
No doubt, man. And by the way, before we get any further, got to tell you about our friends at Liberty Tax. Tax season right around the corner, 803-462-5576. Also, obviously, if you own a small business and you're just frustrated with the bookkeeping side of things, your payroll services, all that stuff that distracts you from actually focusing on the other side of your business, the tax team at Liberty Tax has people on staff that can handle that as well for you. 3 convenient locations in the Midlands: 1123 South Lake Drive. That's in Lexington. 7467 St. Andrews Road. Irmo, 551 St. Andrews Road. Columbia, 29210. Give them a shout, and shout out to Larry for being a supporter of GC Live. Appreciate you, Larry. And again, tax season right around the corner. You want to go ahead and take a look at those guys, and they'll take care of you. I promise you. Chris, that's about all I've got for today. I think we're going to save it unless you've got some burning thoughts. Again, for those who joined us late, the headline says we're going to be joined by Gabe DeArmond. Apologize, that did not happen. He had something come up at the last second, so we had to cancel that. But be on the lookout. Gamecock Central, we're going to have plenty of content coming up soon. I believe we'll have our recruiting expected visitors list out soon. And Chris, of course, GC Live Friday, final breakdown, 1 o'clock, will be, I believe, at the Market on Main Cockaboose, Market Party Express. And it'll be fun, man.
Yeah, looking forward to it, man. Looking forward to being out at the Party Express again tomorrow. We'll finish breaking down the game. Recruiting visitors coming up here shortly on GamecockCentral.com. So looking forward to it. We'll see everybody then.
All right, guys. You have a good one. He's Chris. I'm Wes. We'll see you then.